This is the only place I could find that had half decent lighting. So, you have to make do with what you have. So the wait is finally over. We are getting into our mirror here between Austin Bursavich and Autumn Burchett. And both players with decent looking hands there. A growth spiral for Austin Bursavich, and then early interaction in Mystical Dispute with some Uros and future development for Autumn Burchett.
Right, and both of these hands are the type of thing that you want to be getting in the early turns. The second copy of Uro is going to be a little bit rough on Autumn's side, but having a dispute, a way to accelerate mana, one of those crucial copies of Expansion Explosion to slam the door shut, those are all going to contribute in a big way.
And you see Austin hovering over that Sublime Epiphany, a card that we saw used to great effect by Aaron Diaz last week. I'm sure going to be a Commander All-Star for the rest of time. And in this standard format, I'm very glad that such a cool card like that is able to actually see competitive play.
Right. When it first got previewed, you got to feel there were a lot of players who went, oh, wow, it kind of sucks. This card's going to be legal the entire time that Mystical Dispute is. But when you have a million cards in your deck that are going to be tagged by Mystical Dispute, what's one more?
And if you can power that through, Mystical Dispute is going to win you the game on the spot a lot of the time. So maybe the payoff is worth it there. And we see Autumn looking at this mulligan, Soulseer, another pickup from M21, looking like it's going to the bottom, leaving them with a hand that's one card down, but still perfectly competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having that early copy of Growth Spiral is going to be so crucial in so many of these games.
Yeah, and we identified Growth Spiral as one of the most important cards just to the way that this deck functions. And yeah, these are Growth Spiral mirrors where, that is true to form. Having Growth Spiral puts you at a big lead. So both players having it is going to lead to a very fast start for both of them here.
Right, and one of the reasons that I'm thinking about keeping this copy of Soulseer is that it is a good answer in Game 1 to Nightpack Ambusher, which Austin has 2 of in the main deck.
Yeah, and that leads to this interesting dance where if you have a removal spell like that and you have to choose whether to put that away on a mulligan or to keep it off a scry, that actually is a legitimate decision now, whereas against a creatureless build of Team of Reclamation, you can make an easy call there. And Autumn, no red mana at the moment, so that Soulseer would be in the distant future anyway, but we are getting off to a fast start here, and a copy of Nightpack Ambusher for Austin jumping into the hand. So Autumn is going to wish they had that Soulseer or going to have some other answer to it in short order.
Right, and look at Austin's hand. There are no more lands here.
Yeah, Austin has the Growth Spiral, but Growth Spiral is good because you make extra land drops, and if you can't do that, then it's just a 2-mana cycler.
Oh, let's find some lands, Bursavich.
That is a bold statement, and Autumn has to be reading a lot into that, I imagine.
Yeah, expansion on Opt definitely says that something is missing from Bursavich's hand, and if it were action, you wouldn't be getting rid of an expansion explosion.
And with that in mind, if Autumn had a card like Aethergast or Mystical Dispute, would you expect them to more aggressively go after, let's say, a Growth Spiral or a Hardcast Uro?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit hard to say in that sort of context. I think a lot of the time you're just really trying to make sure that you're getting ahead on the battlefield in the early stages of the game.
Yeah, main phase Growth Spiral there from Autumn, playing around Mystical Dispute, Aethergast, cards of that nature. And Austin does seem to be making, he makes his 3rd land drop there, passing with Growth Spiral and Mystical Dispute at the ready, as well as Aethergast. Can even cycle Shark Typhoon if that seems preferable instead. And 2 copies of Shark Typhoon for Autumn Burchett. So a real Sharknado developing in the skies here.
Nope, don't like that.
Growth Spiral on Autumn's end step for Austin, and we will see if he can find that all-important 4th land drop, and he does, and there's even a Catchy of Triumph to make his mana even more perfect here. And so now he will take a draw. We'll see if he can find a 5th land to play Ambusher with Dispute backup. Finds Uro, which is a way to dig for that extra land, but you don't really want to take the shields down, tapping out for that on your main phase.
Right, and this is an awkward situation where Autumn naturally is going to be incentivized to try and just commit some of their mana here to try and develop a bit more, be it with a Shark or just Growth Spiral. But that could just put the shields down for Austin to sneak in this Nightpack Ambusher.
Is there any consideration to disputing this Growth Spiral?
I think it's a tough one, and it may be even closer to just looking at something like Aethergust here if you don't think Autumn actually has the Wilderness Reclamation in their hand.
Mm-hmm. And Scorching Dragonfire off the top for Autumn. Not the removal spell you want in the face of a possible Nightpack Ambusher. And what we know is going to be a certain Nightpack Ambusher at some point in this game for Austin Bursavich.
Oh, yeah. It is not a matter of if there will be a Nightpack Ambusher. It is a matter of when.
It can also attack a 2/2 Shark if you want to swat that one out of the way. But I think Austin cares more about the cycling here, digging him towards those land drops, which he does find. Castle Vantress and Ketria Triumph, 5th and 6th land drops, and the castle can help him find even more if it comes down to that.
Yeah, I got to feel good about actually just kind of about ripping those lands off the top there. But in a deck that's almost 50% land, sometimes you are just able to keep these land light hands, assuming you're willing to put the effort into actually sifting through your deck, spending things like expansion on the opponent's opt and so on.
Yeah, Austin would gladly take any land over any spell there, is my guess. If he had abundance in play, he would be slamming the land button as hard as he could. And turns out he doesn't need to. He is handsomely rewarded for that cycling, finds the 5th land drop, and choosing to play the Triumph now. So I imagine maybe not picking a fight with the Ambusher on this turn, just choosing to hold his mana up.
Yeah, this is a situation where you kind of just want Autumn to do something, put the shields down, and pave the way for this Nightpack Ambusher. That's why we're seeing this tap land this turn. There's no real way that Austin's looking to spend 5 unless he wanted to do hard cast dispute plus gust, and that's just not realistic.
And there is Wilderness Reclamation for Autumn with enough mana to punch it through a potential mystical dispute. Can get gusted, but that just puts it back on top if you want to, and you can try for it again next turn.
Right, and you really want to look at just slamming that on a turn like this one if you can, because next turn is when Sublime Epiphany comes online.
Yeah, and I have to think that for Autumn, seeing the slightly clunky start of Austin, they have to know that Austin's hand is rolled up with heavy hitters, and so that's why I think we're seeing these aggressive lines with Shark Typhoon, hoping to get the game over with quickly.
Right. What we're going to see with this Wilderness Reclamation, if Autumn didn't want to develop it last turn, it's because they really want to make a big shark this turn, and then later try to combo that Wilderness Reclamation with something to actually do with a huge burst of mana, like Expansion Explosion, to just seal the deal.
Do you think we're going to see a full value Sublime Epiphany on a big Shark Typhoon cycle here?
Oh, no. That would be unbelievable.
And Shark Typhoon gets around most one's interaction. That mystical dispute isn't going to do anything if you cycle your Shark Typhoon, but Sublime Epiphany, that does it all. I'm pretty sure. I've read most of the lines of text, but I can't possibly fathom all the combinations of things that could happen here.
Right, it is effectively the questing beast of cryptic commands, right?
Yeah, I hope we get a techless Sublime Epiphany sometime in the near future.
Nope, absolutely not. That's the point where someone casts it at FNM and tells you it gives their Celestial Call an Infect and Double Strike just because.
Are you so sure it doesn't?
No, I'm not. That's the problem.
And we see Autumn going into the tank here, that rope burning down, and they know what the deal is. That they can go for the Shark Typhoon, but the fact that Austin is so cavalierly sending that Nightpack Ambusher into the red zone in the face of a possible 5/5 Shark, Autumn knows what that could potentially mean here.
And this is a cool no blocks. I'm a little surprised to see that.
Impressive restraint, but if Autumn waits too long, it'll get to the point where even successfully resolving that Shark Typhoon might not be enough to keep them in the game.
Yeah, I imagine what they're looking at here is just making sure that they can represent something that counters a Wilderness Reclamation. And doing this here, you're going to pay some life, but it's going to really just leave the door open for this Epiphany to get you.
Now, do you go for the Epiphany if you're Austin Bursavich, knowing that this could mean an untap into a Wilderness Reclamation followed up by something else?
It feels like you may just have to do that, right? You counter the ability, bounce the shark, draw a card at the very least.
Yeah. And that sets you up for lethal in 2 turns, and then even in the worst case of like Reclamation plus Explosion, you have the Gust, you have a good follow-up play in the form of Uro and maybe Mystical Dispute. So maybe we'll see Austin snap that off.
Right.
And I'm not seeing the Sublime Epiphany in the hand, and there it is going onto the stack. Not the absolute best Sublime Epiphany, but a pretty darn good one, all things considered.
I mean, it made a copy of the Nightpack Ambusher. Autumn's dead on board.
Yeah. And those two wolves pump each other. So yeah, and Autumn does pick up an Ether Gust here that can deal successfully with the token. So Dragonfly can also take down the Shark. So they have the tools to survive for the time being, but crucially, no big payoff for that Reclamation. And we see Autumn just cycle a Ketria Chime, and you have to love to see that if you're Austin.
Yeah, it's certainly something that communicates desperation in this context. And Autumn knows that one of their best ways out of this is to try and charge Blast Zone up to 4 if they can. So they don't want to just offer Wilderness Reclamation into it if they can. But this may just be that point where you need to make something happen and just kind of make these sort of... saying desperation play doesn't feel correct, but something that at least makes you some percentage to win, even if it is a lower percentage.
And if Austin has a good follow-up for the Nightpack Ambusher, then charging Blasting up before is going to feel like a pipe dream. That's just too much time, too much mana. It's not going to be good enough. So I like going for maximum value here, get the Reclamation down, use your removal spells, and hopefully you can piece something together on the following turn.
Right, you were not going to feel good about having to do things this way, but it is a route, right? There is a path out from here.
Absolutely. So one token down. I imagine the other token down before too long. But then Austin will get to follow up with his own Wilderness Reclamation and his own Ether Gust.
Right, and just having this copy of Uro in Austin's hand as well is something that's just going to allow him to apply even more pressure when the time comes.
And there is the second real Nightpack Ambusher there for Austin. So that by itself can make either Wolf into a lethal clock here.
Right, and now we're just getting to the point where Austin has several lethal attackers on the battlefield.
Right, and the Ambusher trigger even making a Wolf, which is going to pose a problem by itself. So yeah, Autumn does charge up the Blast Zone here, and I guess I can tag both Nightpack Ambushers to save off lethal, so Austin will have to keep that one in reserve for the time being. But when that Blast Zone is used, Austin has the Reclamation and the Ambusher, whichever is better to follow up with.
Right, you do what you gotta do, but this isn't going to be enough for Autumn in the short term, right? This Scorching Dragonfire is going to get countered, and you need to have an answer to either this Wolf token or this Shark token.
And a whole menagerie there on Austin's side of the battlefield. And just a Steam Vents for Autumn, that's not going to help. That won't get them back in the game. But we'll see if this Uro can dig them into anything better.
This is something that does actually provide a reasonable buffer whenever you're being pressured by a bunch of 2/2s.
It does. Unfortunately for Autumn, the Ether Gust and the Mystical Dispute can both interfere with this Uro and be a real annoyance for Autumn in this board state.
Right, this is a situation where even if the Mystical Dispute doesn't tag the Uro, because Autumn's relying on this Blast Zone, it is going to be good enough when there's only one more turn of magic that feels like it matters.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Mystical Dispute, not going to counter the Uro if Autumn wants to, but if Autumn pays 3, that's 3 crucial mana potentially is going to stop an escaping of an Uro on this turn, or if they draw some other useful sorcery speed card, that's going to be hard to deploy now.
Yeah, it's really hard to see what the way out is at this point that doesn't involve a Wilderness Reclamation trigger, and I just don't think that's a possibility with this Aether Gust in Austin's hand.
Yeah, it seems like Austin has it covered from every angle, and then even if there's no big fight on this turn, Austin can just activate Castle Vantress, and that's the really nice feature of having these abilities baked into your mana base. Exactly,
just always having ways to spend your mana is really just a hallmark feature of this standard format. There's always so much to do, so many actions to take.
Yeah, and I love this here. Ether Gust on the Wilderness Reclamation in response to the Uro, which means no big untap at the end of the turn for Autumn. And so if Austin can beat the Uro on board, and it looks like he sure can, then that's going to do it. Autumn is going to have nothing left.
Right, so we see this Wilderness Reclamation go on top, which Autumn had to do, hoping that there wasn't another Nightpack Ambusher.
Yeah, and that's game one going to Austin Bursavich. So as we go into sideboarding here, I'm sure both players know exactly what they want for this matchup. What we see, Nightpack Ambusher jumping into the deck for Autumn Burchett, Austin going up to the full 4, I believe. What are we looking at in sideboarding here for the mirror?
So a lot of what I would expect is cut your red spells, add your blue spells, season to taste on your Wilderness Reclamations and Expansion Explosions, depending on
Yeah.
how heavy you think your opponent is going to be on the control angle.
And we
Glancing at Bursavich having access to so many copies of Negate, I would be surprised if Autumn is very high on the Wilderness Reclamation angle in their deck.
And we see the same mini straight for both players of Reclamation, Expansion Explosion, and Uro. Copies of each all hitting the bench, and that shows you just how much the dynamic changes in this matchup, where those are three of the most important cards in the main deck that make this such a fearsome deck to play against. Those aren't really what these post-sideboard games are about a lot of the time.
Exactly. It feels like a much more subtle game, similar to what Bursavich was doing game one. I know that Sublime Epiphany was a big, flashy thing to do, but what really decided that game was just different mana exchanges that kept breaking in Bursavich's favor.
Yeah, we see a Spectral Sailor creeping into Autumn's deck there, just on the far left. And Autumn has a very diversified sideboard, lots of different tools for lots of different matchups. Commence the Endgame, a familiar card for these Growth Spiral mirrors. We see that come into play. Brazen Borrower as well. So some familiar stuff and also some new stuff here for both players.
Right, just those Commence the End games in particular is something that really help you capitalize on the games where you have a ton of cards in your hand, and you just make something that is able to go toe-to-toe with basically any threat in the deck. It feels like extra copies of Shark Typhoon in terms of being a flash threat that the opponent is going to struggle to actually interact with.
And it looks like, unfortunately, Sublime Epiphany does hit the bench for Austin Bursavich. Understandable in a matchup which is more of a flash game post sideboard, and having this kind of clunky 6-mana thing that walks into Mystical Dispute, maybe not where you want to be.
Right. Last game, it definitely felt like a rarity that went off without a hitch and got to do the big flashy thing that it did.
Yeah, and Commence the Endgame we see come in as also a clunky 6-mana instant, but one that gets around Mystical Dispute and Negate, and really any other form of interaction in this matchup.
Right.
And it looks like Bursavich going down to 6 cards, or Autumn, sorry. No, Bursavich, there we go. Orienting our players properly here. So Austin down to 6 cards, but he has early interaction in the form of an Ethercast and an Uro to make his land drops faster and maybe find some action here.
Yeah, and look at Autumn, the magic formula of lands and Growth Spiral, finding another blue off the top to hold up a Mystical Dispute for Bursavich's Growth Spiral if he were to find one.
Which he does. Growth Spiral leaping off the top of the deck for Austin Bursavich. And so
Huge
now,
play.
Autumn, turn 3 on the draw, still gets to hold up Nightpack Ambusher and Shark Typhoon, and 2, I guess 3 if you count Expansion, 3 different forms of interaction here.
And Autumn Burchett, a mythic champion with a blue flash deck, is not the kind of player that you want to play against piloting this type of shell.
And that mono blue deck that Autumn won that Mythic Championship with, that deck had to get really scrappy. This was putting Curious Obsession on 1/1 flyers. This deck is a sock full of pennies. This deck has some more heavy hitters in it.
Yeah, this is a situation where you are not going to see anything like Merfolk Trickster. Every card is a Tempest Gen, and it's all about sequencing your Tempest Gens and negates correctly.
Absolutely. So Nightpack Ambusher here, forcing the issue on the Growth Spiral. I imagine we'll meet an Ethergust from Austin Bursavich, but again, this is the weakness of Ethergust. If you have nothing else going on, you can put your threat back on top, and you're in exactly the same spot next turn.
Yeah, it would not surprise me just to see Autumn draw Slam Ambusher past turn.
And that's especially a more common line post-sideboard when Wilderness Reclamation is often there are fewer copies in the opponent's deck, and there are fewer things they can immediately do with that mana, so you don't have to live in mortal fear of that being their response.
Right, in a lot of ways it feels like slamming Nightpack Ambusher, looking your opponent in the face and saying check. If you make it a turn around the table with that Nightpack Ambusher, it's frequently just going to spell doom. That's exactly what we saw last game, and it is the game that Autumn is likely trying to navigate towards here.
Especially with Dispute and Negate and Expansion. If Autumn gets to untap with the Ambusher, I think the game is going to be in their favor very quickly. Austin does have Brazen Borrower, so Petty Theft can be another temporary delaying tactic for the Ambusher, but Austin needs to make something more substantial happen quickly, otherwise this game is going to be out of reach.
Right, and one of the things that we saw Autumn tanking about with that Aethergust a moment ago is if they want more lands, because they know how land-oriented this matchup can be.
Right, and maybe a fifth land is almost as important as the mirror breaking Nightpack Ambusher here.
Right, when you have all of these big spells in your hand that you want to back up a Nightpack Ambusher with, or any of the threats you draw for that matter, making sure you can hit your land drops, develop to the battlefield, those are all so huge.
And I wonder if we're going to see Nightpack Ambusher in response here, so there can't be anything like a land drop from the Uro holding up a Mystical Dispute.
Yeah, I would expect the Nightpack Ambusher to come down here because casting Uro signals that Austin cannot punish tapping out here with something like Wilderness Reclamation, untap all my mana, pass turn.
And there is the big bad wolf. And Austin will be able to bounce it back with a Petty Theft to buy a turn and maybe follow up with Escaping Uro. But and yeah, there is some Mystical Dispute. So if Autumn had waited, they would have fallen into exactly that pitfall that we mentioned. As it is, that Ambusher is going to be in play for the time being.
Right, and now Austin actually has enough lands where even if Autumn draws a fifth land here, they're going to struggle to protect this Nightpack Ambusher while it's on the stack.
Absolutely, and if Austin draws a seventh land himself, he can maybe end up escaping Uro, through a Mystical Dispute. So this game looking more competitive than it did a few turns ago. The two players kind of on different axes. Autumn has not much mana, but all heavy hitters. Austin has a lot of mana, but needs to find the stuff to do with it.
Shockingly enough, in this mirror in particular, that's frequently going to favor the player who has enough lands. With cards like Mystical Dispute in existence, just hitting land drops is going to invalidate some amount of cardboard from the opponent.
Oh, and it looks like Austin has picked up his own copy of Nightpack Ambusher here. So the big bad wolves potentially showing down in combat in this game. And you think that has to favor Austin in the short term, who can, with that mana advantage, he can play that Ambusher and then protect it with Negate or something else.
Right. This is a situation where this Brazen Borrowers that Austin just developed is going to be able to apply pressure and sort of put the onus of action on Burchett.
We've seen this odd dance between Brazen Borrower and Shark Typhoon before, where Borrower is the Petty Theft mode can take out the Shark token, but then if your opponent's trying to beat down with a Borrower, Shark Typhoon's the best answer to that. In this situation, Autumn is not going to have an easy time finding a window for that Shark Typhoon, although Spectral Sailor, I guess, can also threaten to trade with the Borrower here.
Honestly, in this case, Spectral Sailor just feels like a Mystical Dispute that works with exactly Brazen Borrower once it's on the battlefield.
Would you call it a Doomblade?
No, under no circumstances would I do that. I'd call it a Blue Blade.
I guess on the Doomblade alignment chart, I don't know which quadrant it would fall into, but Autumn does take 3 points from this attack. I imagine the Sailor's going to come in here on the end step.
And we see it get cast, and this may be a spot where Austin wants to try and pick a fight with his Nightpack Ambusher.
Absolutely. You have the 7 lands, so you're not even too scared of dispute. And with Autumn tapping out to cycle the Shark Typhoon, again, this is a great time to land that Nightpack Ambusher.
Right. The other thing that may be on Austin's mind is wanting to be able to cast this Negate to tag something like a Wilderness Reclamation without worrying about a future Mystical Dispute from Autumn.
Mm-hmm. But instead, he does take the chance with the shields down to get the Ambusher into play. Not much of an ambush at this point. You kind of know that it's coming, but you also know that you can't do too much about it.
Well, look, it's on Autumn's upkeep.
Oh, so interesting.
This is actually inviting Autumn to spend the mana on their turn instead.
Yeah, and I think Austin's happy doing that because if Autumn picks and wins that fight, that means that Uro is escaping on Austin's turn, and that's even better to have in play often than the Ambusher is.
Right, when all Autumn has on the battlefield is a couple of 1/1s, this is going to be a huge problem. Either way, just either a 4/4 that makes 2/2s, 3/3s, depending on how you weigh that, or an Uro that is just a personal Howling Mine.
And an Uro of Autumn's own off the top here. So I'm interested to see how Autumn navigates the next few turns of this game, where it's fun to see how these players, what they do when they have all the resources they could ask for available to them. Also very educational to see what they do when they don't have many resources and they really have to make tough choices over what to do with their mana.
Right, now we're going to see a situation where Autumn doesn't know if they want to shock in this breeding pool to have dispute on a blue spell plus negate up, if they're just going to play it tapped. There's a lot that they can do here, and their life is really under pressure as a result of the creatures on Bursavich's side.
Absolutely. So what do you think Austin's view of this game is from his perspective, not knowing what's in the 5 or 6 cards in Autumn's hand at any given time.
I imagine at this point, Bursavich has the read there's at least one copy of Expansion Explosion because there hasn't been a great time for Autumn to use them, and they are a card that Autumn just wouldn't be able to use particularly well. When you see something like a Shark Typhoon for 1, you know the opponent's just digging for lands, similar to what Bursavich was doing last game, and he has to know there are some heavy hitters in Autumn's hand. That's why we've seen Bursavich kind of lean into this aggressive role that he's taken.
And this is a spot where Austin will be looking for any kind of either interactive card or additional threat to really cement this on-board advantage that he has here. Growth Spiral isn't going to do it, but it can offer him more looks at something that might.
Yeah, it's hard to really complain too much when you just get something that cycles.
Absolutely. And is that Spectral Sailor jumping in front of the Brazen Burrow?
Yeah, so that is to put a card in the graveyard for Uro.
Ah, there we go. Yeah, we see Uro off to the side there, but not with the furry orange border that suggests it's ready to cast off its chains and come back to the battlefield.
Right, at this point, Autumn's just considering if they want to throw the shark in front of Nightpack Ambusher to gain 4 life.
And it looks like they will take the hit. So Autumn down to 5. The 1/1 Shark, I guess, threatening a charm block next turn as well. And now Austin is really looking to press his advantage, but he has a few different ways of trying to do that here.
Yeah, and now we are going to get to see that Uro come back, and we have this scary situation where rather than losing out on the Nightpack Ambusher during Autumn's instep a moment ago, now it's just the Brazen Borrower that Bursavich has to pay the price with.
Yeah, although this is interesting, because if Austin goes for the Uro, Autumn can dispute, and then I guess dispute with expansion is a little risky, because then you get tagged by any interactive piece. But even just one dispute can tap Austin out, and then you get to escape your own Uro, and then maybe that can swing the game back in your favor if you draw the right card.
Right, there's certainly a point here where just disputing on the Uro does give you the ability to actually bait something into happening here.
And Austin, it looks like, will force the issue, although let's see what he attempts. Yeah, there is Uro. The jolliest, greenest giant in the standard format.
All right, and it looks like Autumn is thinking if they want to full control here to actually go for that expansion line or just tap Austin out.
Yeah, Autumn may decide it's going to be hard to beat a dispute, to beat something else.
I think they're going for it.
Here we go. We're going to target that spell, and then we're going to target another one.
And this is going to be a huge blowout. Austin has the ability to target the mystical dispute with negate.
Yeah, a massive blowout, as you say, but Autumn is likely thinking, can I beat a negate anyway, realistically? Like, if it's during Uros, but then Austin has a negate and more mana and more action, that's going to be a tall order. So Autumn takes the high-risk, high-reward line. Unfortunately, not going to work out for them this game.
On the other hand, there's also a chance that they were just leaning towards getting whatever negate Austin has out of his hand.
Yeah, and even after that trade goes so poorly for them, they get to escape their own Uro and hold up negate. So if they can survive this upcoming combat, which I guess is easier now because the Ambusher can't realistically attack into the Uro, then they get to untap, they have negate and expansion explosion in hand, and a mystical dispute now too. This might actually be going in Autumn's direction here.
Yeah, if Autumn could just find something like a Wilderness Reclamation off the top of their library, then this game could swing fast.
Oh, are we? I thought we were going to get a Frisky without Shark for a second.
Oh, absolutely not. Under no circumstances.
Sometimes you just have to be aggressive, you know?
Look, I understand why your token is a mad scientist now.
All I'm saying is, if Autumn ends up 1 point short 10 turns down the line, I know which shark to blame for that.
Is it the baby shark?
It may well be.
And wow, how scary is that? Shark in the umpteenth land? Honestly, Austin has enough life to play with. I imagine it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, this is, as it turns out, Ambusher plus Activate Castle Vantress, but this could mean any number of things, realistically, and there is so much life for Austin that why not untap it anyway, just as a semi-buff to represent all of these different possibilities.
Right, what's one more thing, really?
Though again, if Austin loses this game on 2 points short, we're going to know which breeding pool to pin the blame on.
Oh yeah, the only one on his side of the battlefield.
You got it. So now another decision of when to resolve Nightback Ambusher with one on the board already. So we could see after the trigger resolves, does Austin want to go for it now or do what he did last time and pick the fight in Autumn's upkeep?
I feel like here you just want to do it while the dispute shields are down.
Yeah, just get it down, force Autumn to have something. And is there a possibility that these wolves could team up to ambush the Uro here?
I mean, now that we see them all on the battlefield, I feel like if Autumn attacks with Uro, Austin just takes it. Who cares if you're at 17?
Right, and who cares if Autumn is at 11 when you have, 14 power of wolves alone on the battlefield at this point?
Right.
And yeah, I'll go to 17. You're on 11. I have 20 power on the battlefield. That's fine. We'll take that one.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
And crucially, those 5/5 wolves out of range of a 4/4 explosion, which maybe could do some work to stabilize here, but not even in this case. So no, maybe Autumn. Does Autumn have to just cycle the Uro in their hand and hope to find something?
Yeah, I think you have to cycle that Uro here, maybe hope for something in the vein of a wilderness reclamation, which can maybe get you somewhere. It really feels like there's so much that Autumn needs to break here. I'm not sure what exactly they can find off the top of their library, but the cards in their hand right now aren't doing it. It's that simple. So
they need to make something happen on this turn, or the whole pack is going to come to the party and devour them.
Right. This is a real situation where they're just real far behind on the battlefield, have been for most of the game, and this is when it's going to come back and really bite them. This is the turn that they need to get something together.
And the shields are down for Austin. I guess Growth Spiral can put those shields back up depending on what it finds. But if Autumn finds something, we might be back off to the races, but it's going to have to be good. I don't think Shark Typhoon is going to do it.
Oh, gosh. And if you look at the battlefield, Autumn will exactly die.
Yeah, there it is.
So brutal.
Yeah, I guess it is going to be on those thin margins here.
Right. And I guess they're just cycling for one now.
Yeah, if we find, I guess we find an Ether Gust, maybe we can stay in it.
Yeah, and Ether Gust from one of these creatures could be great.
Definitely lots of far too many good targets for Ether Gust over on Austin's side. Oh, and that reclamation, one card too far down for Autumn Burchett.
Wow.
So I imagine they'll make Austin go through the motions here, but if Austin just attacks with everything, this game is going to end and Austin's going to win this first round against one of the best players in the world and one of the best players in this tournament.
Right, and we see just going through the motions, making sure every single base is covered.
There it is. That's a good game. And Austin Bursavich going to be our champion here in game one of this championship qualifier.
Right, and that was so big. Both of those games were defined by Bursavich being able to